Welcome to the International Code Council Region 1 and Region 1 radio show. My name is Tim Spears and I'm the host of Region 1 Radio. Region 1 was established in 2014 and we're made up of 3 states, California, Hawaii, and Nevada. That includes 32 ICC chapters. We're dedicated to excellence in education and engagement to promote a safer environment by bringing code professionals and individuals together. These videos and podcast series are designed to highlight individuals and chapters that make up our region and share their experiences. If you enjoy our show, please rate and review on Apple Podcast and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Today on the show, I'm excited to have join me Fire Marshal Janice Van Mullem with the Huntington Beach Fire Department. She is the incoming president for the California Fire Chiefs Southern California Fire Prevention Officers Association. A little bit of a mouthful there, I'm sorry. And so with that, no further ado, hello, Janice.
Well, hello.
And welcome to ICC Region 1 Radio. How are you?
Super good. I'm so glad to be here. Here in my office in sunny California, overlooking the ocean here in my 5th story office. So too bad I can't turn around and have that in the background, right?
Huh. Yeah, it sounds super, it sounds like you're really struggling this morning, being able to take a look out over the ocean. I'm actually pretty jealous, but that's awesome. So your building sits right there, so you can see the ocean as, through your office windows?
Yeah, actually, it's I'm a south facing, so I'm on the 5th floor, south facing to the beach. I can see the whole coastline. See Catalina, see all the ships come in. It's actually a beautiful view. The problem is it's a very sunny and hot office. So I'm often with my shades down, so I don't get to enjoy it all the time.
You only get to enjoy it till about noon before you really start to bake in the office. I totally understand that. Well, hey, welcome to the show. I'm excited. You and I have been talking about doing one of these recordings for quite some time. And so I'm excited. You and I actually met for the first time in person at the Pittsburgh hearings in the ABM this last September. So we've been kind of discussing about getting you on. And now that you're the incoming president, what better time than now to have you come in and maybe discuss a little bit about your background. So with that being said, can you share with our listeners a bit about your background?
Sure. It is kind of a very varied background. I'm kind of a latecomer to the fire service. So my first degree is in electrical engineering. So I went to the University of Massachusetts, got a degree in electrical engineering, and decided I didn't want to be an electrical engineer. So I wanted to get into public service, public policy. I thought my pathway was going to be kind of, I wanted to go to Washington, D.C., and so I enrolled in school. I got a master's degree in science, technology, and public policy at George Washington. And while I was going to school, I got a job at a defense think tank, and which was really very interesting for your first job out of college to be working. I was working actually in the Pentagon, and it was just a very surreal, job to have. Wow. At that time, I worked for the Air Force, and they were looking at new programs, new environmental programs. And me being, I guess, the only, the new kid on the team, they assigned me to the environmental programs, and the Air Force went into this whole pollution prevention program. So you can imagine fire prevention, pollution prevention. It's kind of the same concept where you make, the business safer by, getting rid of hazardous chemicals and so forth. So
trying to mitigate the risk, right? Trying to find solutions to the problem.
Correct. Yeah. So I decided that was my pathway forward, and I started working as a consultant in the pollution prevention industry, and wind up getting married, getting moved to LA. My husband at the time was in the Air Force and worked at this little tiny base called LA Air Force Base. I worked as a pollution prevention specialist there. I worked in Space and Missile Systems Center as an environmental engineer, and eventually made my way to the KOOPA program. So I wound up getting a job in the Orange County KOOPA, which is Orange County Healthcare Agency, and worked there for 3 years as a hazard waste specialist. Took a little detour, opened my own business in a totally unrelated field. But I think, it was also a bad time for me to start my business. It was like 2008, and the economic, situation was really, really tough. So
Right.
I also decided it really wasn't my thing. So I went back to environmental. I got a job at the Navy base here in Seal Beach in the environmental department. And again, I just, had an opportunity, and this is where Huntington Beach opened my eyes to fire service. So I took a job as a hazmat specialist. We do the hazmat business plan program for Huntington Beach. So we're a participating agency. So I was that person, and through education and interest, I got an opportunity to be assistant fire marshal, and then eventually fire marshal. So, yeah.
So you were able to kind of at least make that progression through the department and get a little bit more fire service experience and kind of make your way through. One of the questions I did have is, what was the business? Like you said, it was unrelated, but were you selling cakes? What was the business? I'm curious.
It was.
Yeah, you're a person of many talents, and so I'm curious what this is.
It was a hair salon. So,
Really?
So my sister is a stylist, and she originally we were going to co-own it. It was a very high-end business. It was in Huntington Beach, and it was a little bit more than I could handle. We had about 30 employees at the peak, but when the economy started to fall, and our business got hit very hard, and it just was really hard to recover from that. So but you learn so much owning a business, like the financial side of things, and understanding just simple things like bookkeeping and money and hiring and firing and all those things, and being responsible for that kind of, all those people.
Well, and being a small business owner, I'm sure that probably helped you in your current area right now in Huntington Beach, and being the fire marshal and seeing how regulations can impact small businesses. And so one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, I was going to wait a little bit longer, but I think that this is a good opportunity to bring it up. I know that the city has kind of been taking a look at that, and we understand how the pandemic has really impacted small businesses, right? And also too has impacted our us doing the inspections, in a sense of going into places that are being used for maybe a little bit different function than what they were initially used for. Maybe we have an assembly occupancy that is no longer really functioning as an assembly, and now it's a little bit different because they're doing meals to go. But I understand that the city has assembled a development assistance team. Can you discuss that development assistance team and what the fire department, what the role of the fire department is in that program?
Yeah, that development assistant team, or DAT, is something offered to businesses that are considering, at kind of more of a conceptual phase, opening up a business in Huntington Beach. And the idea is that it's all run through planning department. So a potential person might come into, they would start with planning, and planning would then assemble a team. And the team usually consists of somebody from fire. So we sit at the table, public works. It might include police. It might include other, it would include building department. So it's a very, it's a friendly, casual conversation about what to expect. There's no plans review. We take their conceptual plans, we review them, we give them our thoughts and what they need to consider. For example, for fire in Huntington Beach, as you know, or may or may not know, we're an oil producing city, and we're also
I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah. So we have a lot of our jurisdiction is just covered with old abandoned oil wells, and there's been development over those. When you develop over an oil well, there's a lot of things that you need to do, and one of those is we have to take into consideration soils. We have to take into consideration methane, and then the abandonment of the well. So letting somebody know that they're going to have to take the time to study that, add in the cost of abandonment of a well. So we give them that information up front, so they're able to come back and be successful with their project.
Well, and that's actually, I was not aware that Huntington Beach was a kind of an oil producing location. I never really would have thought that. And as you mentioned, some of the hazards associated with it and being the KOOPA, right? And being able to talk about those hazardous materials issues, to be able to clean up the site, and be able to move it forward. Those are always big things to take a look at when you're going to try to open up a new business or develop a new location. So that's kind of where hand in hand, right? Working on the hazardous material side, like you said, the pollution, like in your previous life and some of those previous positions that you held, being able to have that background and have those conversations with those folks, that's probably a great value, I would imagine, to that discussion. So we talked a bit about your background. And so we all take different paths, and you highlighted a lot of those different paths. But can you describe maybe some of those notable experiences that you've had throughout the course of your career? And then also, too, any, colleagues, friends, mentors, anybody that has really impacted you, one, to, go from where you were at and be in public policy. I do want to dive more into that because I find that extremely interesting. But also, too, how you made the shift into the fire service.
Well, okay, so I'll break down your question, starting with the last question.
I asked a lot.
So I never expected to be in fire service. Never at any time in my career path did I consider it until I had an opportunity to work as the hazmat specialist. And I loved this job. I loved coming in. I loved wearing the uniform. I loved going out and inspecting the businesses in my community. But what I realized at that point was I'm wearing this uniform and I'm going out and people are looking at me, and I knew zero about fire code, zero. And it was very uncomfortable for me. And so I talked to my boss at the time, the fire marshal at the time, and Chief Reardon, he's retired, and now working at the Santa Ana College as a dean. So but he was instrumental because he listened and he said, "You're absolutely right. Take the education, take the classes. Let's get you started." I made some proposals that I would do fire and life safety at the same time as KOOPA because we weren't doing that, and so that's kind of how I kind of fell in love with fire and life safety, fire prevention. I'm also a code person. I love code, which is crazy. When I was at the KOOPA, that I lived in code, underground tanks and the haz waste, and I just really I felt that was that you had to be really strong in code to be able to do your job well.
Absolutely.
And so I was always a code geek, and so it just was very natural for me to decide that this was my career path. And even though I'm new and I'm a little bit older than most people would enter the fire service, I still feel like it's just it's there's just so much to learn and so much to do, and I'm excited every day to come to work and do great thing, do fun things. I love what I do every day. So.
You use the term code geek, and I think actually a lot of people that I've talked to, throughout the course of this series, these podcast series, have also expressed that same, I don't want to say, it's kind of a weird love of the code and being able to learn more and understand the why. Like when I talk to a few people, we've talked about knowing the why. And so like Kevin McOsker with the building official in Las Vegas, he's big into code development, and he's like, you got to know the why, and he always likes to have code discussions, and I'm sure you do as well, and so it's one of those things that as we think about the code, and I think that's why many of us got into it, right? But like you made the great segue of going from hazardous materials into the fire code. And a lot of people don't realize how much of a role really hazardous materials plays into the fire code. I mean, there's large sections because it's not just about fire prevention, but it's also about life safety. And so there's large sections that deal with, with hazardous materials as well. So
yeah, absolutely. Every year, I try to meet myself and Grant Miner. He was at Fullerton. I don't know if anybody's familiar with him, but he is a great educator, big hazmatter, and we do a presentation at the KOOPA conference on kind of connecting fire code with HMBP and kind of how they overlap.
Okay.
Yeah.
So probably before we go too much further, one of the things that I failed to even talk about was KOOPA. So can you give a little bit of a background on what KOOPA, what KOOPA stands for and what the program is for maybe some of our listeners in Hawaii, Nevada, or across the country? Sure.
So KOOPA is CUPA. It stands for the California Unified Program Agency. And strange name, but what it consists of is they consolidated a bunch of environmental programs and put them kind of under one umbrella, and that's why they call unified, right? And the programs include the hazardous material business plan, so that's your tier 1, tier 2 disclosure, hazardous waste. There's underground storage tanks, above ground storage tanks. There's something called CalARP, which is more of the really nasty chemicals that are in the sphere. They call them sphere of death, that could cause airborne. Yeah. I think it's Clean Air Act more or less that's guiding that one. And if there's another program, I'm forgetting it. Oh, tiered permitting, which is treatment of hazardous waste. So it's if somebody, say in a plating line, they treat their waste before they discharge it so that they don't have to send it off as hazardous waste. That's it's called tiered permitting. So they group them into, so the state has all these different KOOPAs, and generally a lot of times there'll be a county or it could be a city. I happen to be associated, Huntington Beach is associated with the Orange County KOOPA, and my city is a participating agency for one program, and that's the Hazmat Business Plan program. So all the other programs, the underground tank, the tiered permitting, those are being managed by our friends at Orange County Healthcare Agency under the KOOPA. So we work together with our with the KOOPA to do things like the billing. They do the consolidated billing. And if we ever have to do any kind of joint, programs, so we have a really good relationship with them.
So with that, the KOOPA program and the hazardous materials inventory, with doing that, do you do it for the whole county or do you just do it for Huntington Beach?
We do Hazmat Business Plan only for Huntington Beach. So we have about, I want to say 600 or so businesses that have hazardous materials.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's quite,
that's a lot.
Yeah, California sets the bar pretty low for the quantities. And so we're capturing a lot of businesses that maybe in other states you wouldn't see captured in the hazmat program, but we found that even things like CO2, carbon dioxide, in the quantities that are in restaurants now are they're hazardous and they pose risks. And knowing where they are is essential for first responders.
Well, and I look at the hazardous materials. I'm having a hard time saying that today for some reason, but the hazardous materials business plans, I look at a lot of that, like you just mentioned, to understand what those risks are, where we have the chemicals. And you mentioned that the reportable quantities to the KOOPA may be a little bit lower than what those quantities are for the fire code and the permittable quantities that we see in the California fire code. But I look at that as a good indication of where I need to maybe focus my efforts and be able to engage those stakeholders in some discussions, because if they have a lot of hazardous materials, that definitely not only poses a risk to maybe some of the occupants, but also should they have an emergency, maybe our firefighters, our first responders, and those types of things. So definitely something to take a look at. So, well, so I think you're hitting on a lot of key things as we talk about code enforcement and maybe an application of the codes, because we understand that it's a sum of many parts, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of different folks and different agencies, like you just mentioned, with the community or the development assistance team working as the KOOPA and doing those types of things. It's a sum of many parts. We all work together. How do you work to build that coalition and work to maybe try to work to build that coalition in collaboration with code enforcement? Oh,
well, I think that is absolutely essential to have a really good relationship and a positive relationship with our code enforcement. Mm-hmm. I'm very lucky. I don't have a lot of experience with other fire departments, but at least in the city of Huntington Beach, we have a code enforcement that is very responsible and very, we work really well together in terms of helping our community and identifying if there are challenges. So we work really closely. We have a great relationship. We also have a program called the SELA. It helps us kind of intercommunicate between the departments. So we've been able to do referrals very easy. But we're in a lot of meetings together. We meet very frequently to make sure that the community, we're addressing the community issues. So we work, our code enforcement is being built up, which is awesome. We didn't used to have a very strong building code enforcement. So when we go out and do inspections and find building code violations, fire would often have to do the follow-up. And so now our code enforcement, our Huntington Beach code enforcement is phenomenal. They're working hard to make sure that we work together when we identify code enforcement issues. Okay.
Well, that's fantastic. I think that, like you just said, building relationships is key to addressing all of it, because there might be stuff that's outside the fire code. And as you highlighted, some of those building code violations, to be able to work together on that. And I know, like, my staff and myself, we work really closely with our building officials, our code enforcement professionals to help address those risks. So now, I know a lot of agencies have maybe, we just celebrated Community Risk Reduction Week, 3 weeks ago now? And I know that you're prepared to go to the Vision 2020 conference. I'm really jealous, actually, because I think it's going to be a fantastic conference. But we've seen many departments rebrand themselves as community risk reduction departments or community risk reduction divisions. And I think that, fire departments, we no longer really have that sole focus of just fire prevention, but it's also just risk as a whole, right? There's a lot of, as we've been talking about hazardous materials. With that, how do you work to be able to meet those historical mandates of our regular inspections and those types of things, but then also to working to make that shift into addressing maybe some of those other local risks?
Sure. So that's a great question. we did rebrand our division as Community Risk Reduction, and that was one of the initiatives that my fire chief, Chief Scott Haberly, had. He's a visionary. He's great. He's a great fire chief, but he really sees community risk reduction as a key component of the entire fire department. So we did rebrand our fire prevention division as community risk reduction, but we're also giving the making sure it's understood by the whole department that community risk reduction doesn't end in fire prevention. So, you know, the 5 E's apply to our EMS division, our marine safety division. We have, like I said, a fire chief who's very supportive. He actually, we do the training called, well, we used to call it Fire Prevention Friday. We now call it Community Risk Reduction Friday. And it used to be we do 6 separate Fridays where we do a fire prevention topic or something for our firefighters. And we'd hit all, we have 10 working companies on 3 shifts, so 30 companies. So we hit all of them. And he came to every single one of the last one we did, and he actually talked about community risk reduction and how important it was to integrate into our philosophy and how we run our business. Okay. And he has a great story, and I'm not going to repeat it, but his analogy is about this Oscar fish. And I'm not going to repeat the analogy, but basically, so if you ever see Scott Haberly, ask him about an Oscar fish. He talked, we're never going to, we can't keep throwing resources, right, to fix a problem. We can't build more stations. We can't build more, throw more people at it. We need to reduce our risk in our community, reduce the number of, if we're going out on a lot of falls at seniors, we need to address that and work with them. Right. If we're, if we're having fires in places that don't have fire, have smoke, we need to get out there and we need to have that message, and that comes from everybody. So it's awesome to be working for a fire chief that sees that, the importance of that. And so we've done a lot of things. We have a marine safety group is working on their own community risk reduction programs. We have a stingray prevention. So we're trying to, like, for example, they guide people. We have this program called Watchtower, and it guides people who are going to the beach to know where our stingrays are. And so they can avoid, that's really cool. So they can avoid getting, stung by a stingray. Right. And so it's really cool. We are spending a lot more time doing pub ed. We never had a pub ed program. Well, I can't say that. We had a pub ed program. It got eliminated probably 10 years ago. And so we've been trying to rebuild that and taking community risk reduction and finding that pub ed component that helps move the needle on some of those risks. So it's exciting to be working in Huntington Beach.
Wow, a stingray prevention program. You're the first out of like 17 people that I've talked to that actually has a stingray prevention program. Now, I did talk to Chief Todd with the Hawaii County Fire Department, and he was talking about volcanic activity, and that was the first that I was able to talk to somebody about volcano awareness and prevention and preparedness, and you now you're bringing up stingray prevention, and so we understand that local risk is local risk, right? It's not not all 2 departments and not all 2 regions may be the same. There might be some similarities, but they may not always be the same. And one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about being Huntington Beach is very unique, right? You just hit on it's having stingray prevention, but also it's also has the moniker of being Surf City USA, right? And so when you consider those local risks, you hit on stingray safety, but how does that maybe impact other community risk reduction efforts, with your marine program and those other things that you have to, consider as you develop, maybe initiatives to address that local risk?
Right. Yeah. Our marine safety program is unique, obviously, because we have, a lot of ocean front and a lot of city beaches, and we have a harbor. And so we're out there a lot. Our marine safety division is just stellar in terms of their community risk reduction efforts. I could give you a lot more examples. They have a program called SALT, where they educate surfers on rescue. They basically want them to be able to understand how to help people in distress if they're out there surfing.
That's a good idea.
And so that reduces risk a lot, because we have a better chance of save. I mean, our community is very, it's very built out. We have pretty high senior population. We do have pockets of, low income, non-English speaking areas. We have industrial areas. We have, it's a very varied, community. We have wildlands. In fact, we don't have WUI, but we have I didn't mean wildlands. We have, wetlands, and we actually had our first wetland major fire last year. Oh, wow. So we're seeing, our risks of fire is similar to every other community. It's we're dealing with the same things, but then we're dealing with, the marine safety side of things. Oil wells are another issue. They are co-located. I mean, you'll have an operating oil well right next to a home, and it's just the way the city was built out. Yeah, we have a whole methane generating district. So underneath the soil, we have to work a lot with development on mitigating those risks from methane. So a lot of methane barriers are required in certain areas, and some other, levels of remediation are required in others. So, it's a little different here. Very.
I grew up in the Midwest, and we had radon. So, and I think radon is probably, we probably have it in California as well, but that was the big thing when you sold a house. You had to have your radon, you had to be, test your home for radon. But like, it sounds like in Huntington Beach, it could be, methane testing. So it's a little bit different. So, I hit on it again. Local risk is local risk. So as we talk about local risk, one of the things that when I talked with Chief Greg Rogers with Spokane Valley, he mentioned, some of those, we talk about the community risk assessment, and I'm actually in the process of trying to do a community risk assessment myself. And one of the things that when I think about community risk assessments is I always felt it was a really daunting task, because I felt like I had to try to leave no stone unturned to be able to adequately identify what those local risks are. But he really helped to boil it down in our conversation. He said, hey, look, a lot of it's just being able to go out and talk to your firefighters, see what calls they respond to, and see what that is. And so I've started to maybe poll some of my operations staff to get a better understanding of what some of those calls that they're responding to, and how do we develop initiatives and public safety messaging to address that. So in Huntington Beach, what data tools do you use to be able to help better identify that community risk? That's
a really good question, because we had a very similar incident where fairly recently we had, and it's probably because of Christmas, we've had a lot of battery fires, right? And so we just started to add a new data tracking in our reporting, a new local, every incident requires a incident report that's tracked in the NFIRS program. Then don't even, I can't tell you what NFIRS stands for, but the FEMA has a repository for all the incident and all the incident reports. And so we added a local code for that. And we also proactively went out and did a campaign, or we did a video campaign actually, on social media, that we talk about battery safety and how important it is to follow the manufacturer's instructions. We went out, the RCR staff went out and talked to a company that sells electric bikes, and we had a little tutorial on it, and we're getting those messages out. I'd like to be less reactive, not wait until the issue happens and then react from that. But we do have a community risk assessment. Right now it's a little bit more at a very high level. So it kind of tells us, we've got a pretty moderate risk level for fire. But I'd like to get down to the first due areas. So we'll work on, what's unique about your first due area, and work with the folks at their station to see what their major needs are. We've got a couple stations that, like, we have an area that has a lot of senior population. So, they're going to have a lot of calls that are related to medical calls related to the senior population. So we'll get there. But in the meantime, we have open dialogues. We just started going through all our fires once a month with our the battalion chiefs, see if we hit all the CRR messaging. What else can we do? Just to make sure that we're identifying those trends.
That's fantastic. And like you hit on some things that I'm probably going to try to implement on my own as well, is just being able to review the monthly fire data, making sure that you get the social media messaging out there, and be able to kind of tell that story. So that way, hopefully we can avoid these things from happening again in the future. You mentioned the having concerns or having additional incidents with the batteries. And I think that we're starting to see maybe that to be a growing trend. Are you using the right type of charger and the cords, and are you following the manufacturer's instructions on how to charge these things? And so, and me, I know that there on occasion I may not use the right cable. You can buy a lot of aftermarket cables to be able to charge your appliances, but it's important that you make sure that you try to get the one that goes specifically with that. We even saw that with e-cigarettes. A lot of times e-cigarettes, they'll charge it with some different things or different equipment, and it definitely poses a risk. So when we talk about that, and a lot of we always deal with complacency, right? It's not going to happen to me. So how did you overcome a little bit of that with the battery charging and be able to help fight against that inertia to be able to identify that risk and hopefully be able to mitigate it a little bit better?
I think it's exactly what you're it's like reacting and making sure that when you start seeing those trends that you jump on that immediately. We just recently, we've had a lot of small fires being lit in dumpsters in the parks, and we just can't figure out who's doing this. So we've put together a coalition with the PD and fire, and our battalion chief is like, we're going to be on top of this. We're going to find the source. So it's reacting, getting the information out to the public. We have a new public affairs officer. She used to be the PIO for the PD. And so on the battery fires, we worked with her to get that out into social media from the city's standpoint. So we'll work with everybody, PD and the city manager, make sure we get that information out as best we can. We do find social media works if the message is engaging. And what I mean by that is it can't just be take a take an image from somebody else and share it and say,
Yeah.
here you go. Yeah. You need to, test your batteries. It needs to come from people here. It needs to have like a personal message almost. So we found that more effective.
Well, that's a good perspective. I mean, a lot of us may try, and I did this for a while, just trying to use different messaging, knowing that I had certain risks, and then I would use infographics that may be a little bit more generic, and those didn't necessarily have as much impact. But when we share, tie that messaging maybe to something that we did respond to, that seems to have a little larger impact, and hopefully then, avoid it from happening again in the future. That seems to be where I think you're also hitting more success, and trying to hopefully mitigate that in the future. So, but all right. Well, so you mentioned those videos. I'm going to ask, where can folks that are listening to this podcast right now, where can they find those? Where can they find that video campaign? Is it only on like Facebook, YouTube? Go to your website. Where can they find those videos?
I wish I had a perfect answer for you right now. We put them out on social media. So primarily, I'm not a social media person. So it goes out on Instagram, and I think it goes out on our mostly Instagram, and then kind of goes out from there to Facebook and other places. We did a lot of video for example, during COVID, when we couldn't do our open house, we did a whole series for 2 years in a row on, and it was great. And it was out on our I want to say it's on our website, but I'm gonna have to say I'm not sure where it is, where it lives right now. But it was awesome, and we got a lot of information. Community loved it. We got folks from all our departments to be like featured in it. So we've got some of our new recruits in. We've got some of our Marine safety
that's
people.
Cool.
It was great.
Well, what I'll do is, if you can send me the links, I'll make sure to include that in the show notes. So if you're listening to this podcast and you want to, and watching it, and I'll include it in the comments on our YouTube, and then also on the podcast platform as well. So people can definitely check those links out. We'll find it, and we'll make sure to link to it, so that way we can share that information with everybody else.
Yeah, I must say, I'm really lucky, because I do have staff that have stepped up and said, this is not in my job description, but we're gonna get this, and we're gonna do it right, and we're gonna invest we're gonna do a nice video, we're gonna do a little bit of editing, and it's gonna come out, and it's gonna be A+ work. So it's awesome. I love it.
Well, maybe I should tap your staff, because I try to do a little bit of video editing to these podcasts. I also try to do a little audio editing, and I am not very good at it. I am not only the host, but also the producer, editor extraordinaire. And so sometimes they turn out well. Sometimes they always could be a little bit better on my, in me trying to package it. But yeah, but you're right. So many of us during the course of, 2020, 2021, really had to think outside the box to address and be able to share information. And you mentioned the virtual offerings that you guys presented to the community to, continue to share that information, because it is valuable. As we talk about the pandemic and those types of things, what do you see as maybe some of those things that will last? We've all had to alter our the way we deliver services to the community, but what are some of those things that you see that will continue to, go on past this pandemic? As in California, we're starting to go into, what do they say, an endemic, and starting to maybe live with the virus, and, being able to, start to move forward. But what do you think we'll see in fire prevention and community risk assessment, or community risk reduction?
Well, for sure is electronic plan review, without question. And we decided that all of our fire plans would come in electronic. There's not an option to submit them in paper anymore. And we were a little concerned about how we've had zero problems, zero. So that I think has been super successful. We're able to process those online. We're able to do plan reviews wherever we can. It doesn't have to be in an office. It can be at home when we were having to work from home. So we were able to provide a continuum of service, which was awesome. Other than that, we're just, in terms of risk, and how things have changed, we are going to spend a lot of time trying to figure out how best to provide, our services to the community. And that may mean changing what we do and looking at, what our higher risk occupancies are, or lower risk occupancies. We're looking at a self-inspection program where we won't have to go in and go into certain low risk occupancies, let them do the self-inspect, and we'll document that. So we're looking at that should be coming up hopefully soon. We're going through a process of going to council and all of that on that program. But I think it did change the way we do business. We definitely did inspections remotely when we had to, and that worked. It's not ideal. It worked. Right. But I think we came out using our time wisely, maximizing the technology, and kind of ripping off that Band-Aid when it came to electronic plan review.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us we were in that transition, right, where we started accepting electronic plans, and we were kind of still working through it. But really, March of 2020 that we all were like, okay, now we either have to do it, or we're going to set a bin outside. We're going to allow the plants to sit in the sun, and, because we didn't know if it was, surface contact from the virus, really had anything to do with it. But, and so being able to shift and move forward with electronic plan review. And I think we've all been fairly successful in that transition. And it's been, I will say that has been one of the things I do think that helps build some efficiencies as we move forward. I mean, we definitely, I think you just kind of hit on it too, the continuous process review and adaptation that I think that COVID really taught us, is that we can't be continue, do things the way we've done it for years. We always have to look to improve. And I think that that's really going to, myself included, reflect on how we can continue to better our processes and not be a maintenance of effort, and try to look to the future and try to find those future things. Who knows? Maybe we'll have VR glasses to conduct inspections, or things like that. That might, you never know nowadays, right? So
that'll be cool. That
would be interesting. I know in talking with Chief Rogers, he mentioned that they have VR fire extinguisher training, and it's phenomenal. I kind of wish I would have thought of that, because it is something that he said that you can be able to get a lot more people through that type of training, and be able to do it at a lower cost, but it does have as much benefit as just our standard or what we used to do for fire extinguisher training. So I know that you and we've had a lot of conversations about this. We actually attended the leadership training by Fire Chief Michael O'Brien with Brighton Fire Authority out of Michigan. And so you and I have had a lot of conversations about that. And, one of the things I wanted to get your take is, as code professionals, we're always looking to maybe better refine and develop our leadership skills. So how do you engage and motivate your staff in Huntington Beach?
That's a good question. I mean, I kind of start with myself and just make sure that I'm, leading by example. I really feel it's important to have the relationships either, with other departments within the city and then outside the city. So, and that's why I really was very interested in becoming involved in the SoCal FPOs, and from there it kind of expands, right? You get more and more and more exposure, but and I have to say again, I'm very lucky. I'm in a department that very much encourages leadership training at all levels. Mm-hmm. And so, we're all of us are able to, we're given the authority, and I believe this is true, to push, down, set your expectations, and then let everybody do what they need to do. So that's really important. And if you want to check out a really cool document on our webpage under fire, Huntington Beach Fire, we have a leadership intent document, amazing, put together by the department on what the important things are for that from the top down that is expected from everybody in terms of leadership, whether that's demonstrating your passion for your job or being just part of the joy of being in this department. So really cool, check it out. And I just I have a great group. I am not the smartest person here. I definitely have to rely on staff for almost everything. I definitely, we do some really cool things. I think we have we set quarterly objectives and key results, and we have a nice tempo on that, and we make sure we're getting things done that we want to get done. And we're also making sure that we're maintaining our state mandated inspections and staying on top of those. Yep. So it's kind of like the must do's, and then the things that are where you're able to stretch and do new and innovative things, which is very much supported in our culture. So,
Yeah, it sounds like just in some of those other, answers that you've had, some of the other questions I've asked is being able to maximize the skill sets that maybe we talked about the pandemic, being able to maximize the skill sets of that are unique skill sets, right? And being able to take those skill sets and be able to help, that is, I think, good leadership in a sense, because everybody's got unique talents, and how as a leader can we maximize those unique talents, and always trying to explore those opportunities. Maybe this is my unique talent that I get to talk to everybody. Actually, this is more of an education for me than it is anybody else, I think. So I'm kind of selfish in that I get to talk to a lot of cool people and get a lot of good information. So then I can go back to my department and I can try to implement some of these things. But yes, I think that the pandemic, and even, as good leaders, we try to maximize those unique talents as much as we can. And also that servant leadership as well, as how can we help them maximize those talents, and what can we do to help them with that? I think that you highlighted that very well, during our conversation today. Now we're getting about to the top of the hour. I know that you have, some other commitments today, but, and I joke, with our Region 1 board the other day that I always wait till the end to ask this question, and I don't know why, but I think I let the conversation get away from me, because this is an ICC podcast, or ICC Region 1 podcast, not the ICC podcast, but ICC Region 1. And with that being said, how do you engage with ICC, and what are some of those ways that you be able to get information and share information?
Well, first of all, I was the first one to sign up for your podcast. I listen to your podcast all the time.
I appreciate that.
I really do enjoy it, and I'm flattered that you asked me, considering the amazing people that you've interviewed, and it's very interesting. So I really appreciate, as a Region 1, doing that for everybody. So hopefully you'll build up your audience, and people will get more and more excited about it. But I love meeting all the people. And,
I hope so.
All over the place. It's cool. Because I'm on the SoCal FPO board, and we are a section. So we get ICC updates from Susan Dowdy and Carl Flippinger.
Yep.
Constantly. It's awesome. We know what's going on every month. We're updated so we can stay connected there. And of course, I've signed up for every email blast on ACC that I could possibly sign up for. So I do get advised on what's going on there. We're obviously very active with code development, and if I could encourage everybody listening to go to the ICC meetings, the hearings, and participate, it was one of the best experiences I ever had. Loved every minute of it. We're very lucky because our FPOs our fire prevention officers work together to put together, our thoughts in advance about how we're going to vote. And that's amazing. So you could be part of that. I took advantage of a scholarship. So I encourage everybody who maybe not, doesn't have the full funds to do it, to apply for a scholarship and just go. And I want to stay connected with other ICC, Region 1, obviously I'll stay connected there. There's a ICC manages a building and fire safety California group. I'm connected in there, and then just all the other. LA Basin has a great
absolutely
membership meetings, and those are great to attend. So I intend to continue whether I'm on the board of the SoCal FPOs or not.
Yeah, so I think, you mentioned just get involved and do what you can to get involved. And I grew up, I'm similar to you in the sense that I have not lived in California all my life. I was kind of a late arriver. I arrived in California, I think, when I was in my mid-30s. And so now I'm, trying to play catch up. But I will say that since I've been in California, I've got to, meet and discuss, code things and California, and really, I would say our area, the Pacific, region has always been very proactive and innovative in the codes. And so with that being said, it's one of those things, making sure to get involved and work with those people. And I think that more people, the more you do that, the more you attend those other meetings, get involved in code development, the better it will be. And then you can be able to share that why with people that you work with, why we do what we do, and have a little bit better understanding. So, well, Janice, with that, we're coming to a close. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about before we wrap up this episode of Region 1 Radio?
No, I just want to say thank you, Tim. This has been awesome. Yeah. If anybody's listening and Tim asks you, please say yes.
Yes, please.
And thanks for doing this. This is really phenomenal. So appreciate it. And I hope to meet everybody that listens. Friend me on LinkedIn, and I just want to stay connected and learn from everybody else. So.
That's right. That's what this is. This is a learning experience to be able to share those experiences. So, and I'll make sure to link back to the video campaign. I'll try to find that. If you can send me the links, I'll link back to that. And then also the leadership document. I'll make sure to post a link to that so everybody can take a look at it, and some of those other things that we've talked about through this episode. So with that does bring this episode to a close. Unfortunately, we're pushing an hour. So I want to thank Fire Marshal Janice Van Mullem for joining us today. It was a great insight, and stingray awareness was definitely something that I learned today. I never even considered it, so that was fantastic. We hope that you appreciate these insights and experiences shared today in this episode and this podcast. As always, I want to thank you for watching and listening to ICC Region 1 Radio. And as Janice mentioned, please, if you'd like to be featured on an upcoming episode, please feel free to reach out to me, or I'll try to reach out to you. I definitely try to seek people out. So if you have some information you want to share with the rest of our audience, I think that would be fantastic. If you enjoyed the show, as I mentioned before, please make sure to review and rate us on Apple Podcasts, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. And with that, I want to say goodbye and thank you again, Janice. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Tim.